Hey people. So one thing a lot of people do at this time of year is they have a very good idea, which is, hey, you know what? It's the start of November. I'm going to try and clean up my diet and exercise habits until the end of the year now, because I know I'm going to eat like a complete bridge stroll between, like, say, Christmas week and January 1st. So hey, how about I lose a little bit of body fat before the onslaught in December begins? That's actually not a very bad plan, right? As long as you don't completely abandon it during the end of the year, kind of deal. Quick aside, we all know that people's body weight and body fat tends to trend upwards over the course of their lives. One thing that we see in the research is that people generally do a pretty good job of maintaining their weight from like January through to late middle November, and then most of the weight people tend to gain tends to be like a big amount in December, followed by like losing a bit of it in January and February, but not quite all of it, and then kind of maintaining that for the year, then going up again the following year, and that tends to be kind of the pattern by which things tend to trend towards, well, bad over the course of somebody's life. So, if you can take a chunk out of that, that's actually a pretty good plan. Get ahead of the curve and get in there. Now, so what I thought I'd do today is tell you guys about setting realistic weight loss targets over the course of the next 8 weeks as we approach the end of 2020. I know where the hell did 2020 go, right? But that's, much less said about that, the better, I guess. Okay, so you want the short version? The short version is about 1 to 2 pounds a week. It's a pretty good overall goal, right? But things like that are really unsatisfying because it's like, hey, here's this stupid rule, and it's like, where does the stupid rule come from? And if you just give people, arbitrary rules without really telling them what goes into them, then it's often very hard for them to, one, believe them, and two, actually stick to them. And, we see, say, 1 to 2 pounds per week, and then the first thing a lot of people think is like, well, my mate Fred lost like 80 pounds in a month, so, that's kind of bollocks, I'm going to aim to do that. And, then you get all kinds of problems all over the spectrum if people don't know where this stuff comes from. So you want the short version of this video, 1 to 2 pounds a week. If you want the long version, come with me. We're going to talk about it and discuss what's going on. Now, I'm going to show you guys a spreadsheet. Don't panic, right? It's got a lot of numbers on it. It looks kind of scary, but we're going to go through it step by step and we're going to figure it out. So get a cup of tea and you're going to know exactly, how to set a fat loss goal based on the kind of, what would you say, the level of aggression you want to pursue it with and how much fat you actually have to begin with. Okay, I'm going to get out of the way. Here comes the spreadsheet. So here I am. Alright, so let me talk you guys through this step by step, right? So what I've done here is I've just put today's date up on the top. It's November 2nd as I film this. I put in some typical numbers for somebody who has a body weight of about 90 kilos, wants to lose a bit of body fat, and they're currently about 30% body fat. Don't get too upset about your exact body fat percentage, folks. It's actually not a number that you can actually know. The only way to precisely measure somebody's body fat percentage is an autopsy, and that's usually not very repeatable for fairly obvious reasons. Everything else is a body fat estimate, right? And all of the methods of estimating body fat have problems with them. People think X-rays are the gold standard, but that's actually not what DEXA machines were built for. It's just like a thing that people try to do with some of the data from them. They're not 100% accurate. They have problems at the extreme ends on both directions. The underwater weighing isn't bad, but it's also not 100% accurate. The calipers are a waste of time. The bioelectric impedance machines have all kinds of issues with them. Just recognize you can't know it. Relax, right? But we know, say if we get, a reasonable measurement and somebody comes in as 30%, we know for damn sure they're probably between 25% and 35%, and that's actually not going to change our numbers very much, right? So that's fine, right? Best way to do this by yourself is just Google the words Navy body fat calculator, and what you'll find is a little formula that invites you to enter your height, your weight, your waist circumference, your wrist circumference, and your neck, and I think there's hip as well for ladies. There's differences between the gents one and the ladies one. But you can do that at home with a tape measure, just like ordinary tailor's tape measure, wrap around, and then you can get a number that's good to within 3 to 5%, and that's totally cool, right? So, big aside. Now, somebody who is 90 kilograms and 30% body fat has about 27 kilograms of fat on their entire body, right? Now, the number of kilograms of fat you have defines the amount of energy that is available for use in your body at any given time for fat loss, right? So, the number that's generally kind of tossed around in the literature, I'm going to get this right. It's this is in my formula, but I've forgotten because I've done it too long ago. It's approximately 50 calories per kilogram of body fat per day, right? Let me just check that out. Is that my conversion factor? Yeah, so it's about right. So if you have a kilogram of body fat, just due to the biology of those fat cells, that kilogram can release approximately 50 calories worth of energy per day for use in your body for fueling you and doing whatever you're doing, right? Now, so logically you can figure that out, right? You can say, okay, well, if I have 27 kilograms of body fat, that means the maximum amount of fat that can be released, the maximum amount of energy that can be liberated from my fat cells per day is therefore about 1400 calories per day, right? Now that is what defines the maximum calorie deficit that you can tolerate without a bunch of shitty shit happening, right? So, we would like it when we're trying to lose body fat that we don't lose a bunch of muscle mass, we don't get excessively fatigued, we don't have major reductions in activity level where your body's trying to desperately defend the overall energy status of you and keep you alive, right? So recognizing if somebody tries to set a calorie deficit that is much below the amount of energy that's available from their fat stores, all the bad stuff happens, right? Muscle loss, metabolic slowdown, all that kind of stuff that you don't want. Typically when somebody has a body fat loss goal, it's not just a body fat loss goal, it's a build or maintain muscle mass while losing body fat, while feeling good, while pursuing some exercise, and not interfering with my life too much goal, right? So that makes it much more complicated than just lose weight, right? You want to lose weight, go tie yourself to a tree and make sure you have plenty of water, right? You're going to weigh way less in a month. But you'll lose a bunch of muscle mass, your metabolism will be in the toilet, you'll feel like dog shit, and you won't really get a lot done, right? So calorie deficits you want to figure them out within those kind of ranges, right? So the quick one here, so say if somebody weighed 100 kilograms and they were 40% body fat, you can see here they would have 2,200 calories of energy available in their fat cells for use per day. If somebody weighed 60 kilograms and was 20% body fat, they would only have 660 calories of energy available in their fat cells per use per day, right? So once you know this about somebody, you can actually start figuring out what kind of calorie deficit they can tolerate, right? So let's go back to our 90 kilo, 30% body fat person. It's kind of a middle of the road fat loss client. Now, you may have heard this term basal metabolic rate before. So let me tell you what that is. Your basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy it would take to run your body if all you did was lie on the floor and not move per day, right? So no activity, no anything else going on. That's your BMR, right? So our 90 kilogram person at 30% body fat is going to have a basal metabolic rate of approximately 1,700 calories per day. You also can't know that exactly, right? This is a basal metabolic rate estimate. There's no way we can actually figure out exactly every day what the precise amount of energy that would have taken. Those last couple of digits don't worry about them, right? But we know it's not 2,000 and we know it's not 1,500, right? It's going to be, we're pretty confident it's between 1,600 to 1,800 for this person, right? So we're just going to say 1,700 and call it there, right? Now, every bit of activity you do that is above lying on the floor creates more demand for energy, right? So, our friends, the physicists, tell us that if you move a kilogram through some distance, it requires some energy to do that, right? So every time you move yourself around the place, you're going to use a little bit of energy doing that, right? And guess what? The more you weigh, the more energy it takes for you to kind of go about your day and do what you're doing, do some exercise or do whatever you're doing. So we talk about these things called activity factors for figuring out how much energy people are burning. So this is just a multiple of somebody's basal metabolic rate, right? So our big heavy person has a bigger basal metabolic rate and they're going to burn more energy while they're moving around and whatnot. So typically for somebody who's sedentary, we would give them what's called an activity factor of 1.2, right? So that's that's no formal exercise. So this is just the amount of activity involved in getting out of bed, putting on your clothes, walking down to the kitchen, making breakfast, and whatever, getting in your car and going somewhere, or just walking around the house looking for the TV remote or whatever you're up to. Typically somebody who's not active, or in the sense of not doing formal exercise or not having a physical job, we'd give them a BMR, or sorry, no we wouldn't. We would give them an activity factor of 1.2. That's what we multiply their BMR by in order to find what's called their maintenance calories, right? So in the case of this person, that'd be about 2,000 calories per day. Now let's just watch what happens to that if we go with a heavier, lighter person again. So say we have a 120 kilogram person, we can see their BMR is probably a bit higher. It's probably 2,100. So their maintenance calories for them is going to be 2,600 per day. If we had our little light person again, so let's say we had our 60 kilo person who's only 20% body fat, you can see their BMR is only about 1,400 and their 1.2 activity factor is 1,700 per day kind of thing. So you can see how these numbers are all going to change depending on if somebody's at the the larger, heavier end with lots of body fat available, or the smaller, leaner end of the spectrum kind of thing. So again, let's go back to our kind of middle of the road dude again. All right. So you can see every time activity increases, we're going to see an increase in maintenance calorie requirement, right? So if somebody starts doing, I don't know, a bit of walking per day or something like that, maybe they go out for 30 minutes and start kind of burning a bit of extra energy, and maybe lifting weights twice a week or something and going for a big hike at the weekend, we might give them an average activity factor of 1.4, so you can see how their maintenance calorie requirement goes up a little bit with that. If you want to get into much more detail on this, you can assess what's called the metabolic equivalent of task of an individual activity. That's METs for short, MET. So walking, for example, causes you to burn energy at about 3.5 times your basal metabolic rate. Of course, variations depending on how fast or how slow you walk. Things like playing a sport at a reasonable level is going to be like 7 to 12 mets. So if you play like whatever 2 hours of soccer or something like that, maybe you're going to be doing 9, 10 mets kind of thing for like whatever you can get into. You can really get into the weeds in this stuff if you wanna. But typically what people do is they normally just bundle all that together into these things called activity factors, and you can look these up online if you like, for depending on your own activity stuff. This is something I do with my clients all the time. I estimate this stuff for them so you guys don't have to do all this maths and shit. But anyway, just to note that the more activity you do, you can see the more the maintenance calories for this person will rise, right? So somebody who's like really super active, like maybe they have a physical job and they're training lifting weights, you can see even though their BMR is only like 1700 per day, they might be doing like 3,800 calories per day worth of overall work, right? If somebody's activity is really high, that's not like an unreasonable thing for like somebody who is big into their gyms and maybe on their feet quite a bit throughout the course of the day would notice. Now, so what I've done in this column here is I've taken this number here, right? So the available calories from fat per day. I've looked at somebody's maintenance calorie intake and looked at just kind of subtracted those from each other, right? So if this person's maintenance calories are this much, and this is the maximum amount of calories that is available from their fat per day, then logically speaking, that is the lowest possible number of calories that somebody could eat without like their body being unable to meet those energy needs, right? And we're going to see that these numbers get a bit squirrely in places, right? So our person whose maintenance calorie requirement is 2,000 per day and they have 1,400 calories per day available in their body fat stores, if they wanted to lose body fat at the most extreme rate end of the spectrum type territory, if they were to eat like 600 calories per day, which you can actually live through for a while, right? They would, in theory, be able to meet their energy needs from body fat. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea, though, right? Now, you might recall a little bit earlier, we said most people don't just have a lose fat goal, right? They also have a maintain muscle mass goal. So now we need to go back and we need to talk about somebody's lean mass, right? So our 90 kilogram person with 30% body fat probably has about 63 kilograms of lean body mass here. That's not the same as muscle mass. That's just like your non-fat body mass, right? So this includes all of the water in your body, all your bones, all your connective tissue, all your internal organs, all the stuff that is not fat is called your lean body mass, right? So that's kind of where roughly this person's at. Now, your protein requirements are more or less determined by the amount of lean body mass that you have, right? I mean, you could argue they go up a little bit if you're like training really intensely with weights, and there's all sorts of little modifiers, right? Where if somebody's like dieting really, really hard and there's very little carbohydrate in their diet, carbohydrate has the effect of like, substituting for protein in some spaces here and there. So just recognize that like the rule of like between about 0.7 to about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass is not bad. That's pretty good for most people most of the time. So you could leave that as reasonably okay. So what I've done here is I've taken this number, which is about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. You could do this as 2.2 grams per kilo if you prefer, if this really offends you, but I don't know, kind of old school. 1 gram per pound is kind of easy to remember. So there you go. Now, 1 gram of protein contains about 4 grams. No, it doesn't. It contains about 4 calories, right? So what I've done over here is I have listed the number of calories from protein that this person would have to eat in order to not suffer like muscle loss and muscle wasting and all that kind of bullshit that we don't want, right? So that means for this person to meet their protein needs, they're going to have to eat 550 calories from protein per day to not like lose a bunch of muscle and just generally have a lot of bad stuff happen, right? Now then we have what's called the non-protein calories remaining over here in this column. So you can see this person, if they were to try and do the maximum gigantic calorie deficit possible here, they'd have to eat like 590 calories per day. They'd have to eat like 550 calories of protein, and now they only have like 35 non-protein calories remaining. That's not going to work, right? Because at least for anything resembling the long term, because of course we have other requirements per day, right? We need some fiber, we need some vitamins and minerals. We want to get our vitamins and minerals from like fruits and vegetables, which means there's going to be some like tag-along carbohydrates and some other nutrients in there as well. That's going to add some additional calories. So we can see straight away for a sedentary person who's 90 kilos and 30% body fat, they're just not going to be able to really lose body weight. They're not going to be able to lose body fat at the sort of rates at the extreme end of the spectrum here by not doing any exercise, right? Because they're just not going to be able to eat enough food to actually maintain anything resembling like good health and good nutrient status and good anything else, right? So we'd have to start going up the chain here a little bit. So we can, we flick down here a little, we get to about the point where somebody's got like 1,000 non-protein calories remaining. That's probably reasonable, right? So if we start kind of looking at, we've had to increase the activity factor to 1.8 here, so maintenance calories have gone up to that. Yeah, this is going to get a bit numbery pretty quickly, I'm aware, but just to note that you're going to need some sort of a buffer of non-protein calories remaining here for it to be practical for you to meet your other nutrient needs on any kind of a diet, right? So if you're going to say, right, I'm going to lose fat at the absolute fastest rate possible, it's like, well, you're probably not, because you're really going to have to increase your activity level to do that, right? And if you're starting from sedentary, it's a really bad idea to try and ramp up your activity extremely quickly, because your joints and your muscles and your nervous system is not adapted to that level of force and that level of exercise frequency. So you're probably going to experience a lot of exhaustion and joint pain and a lot of other stuff that you don't want, making this a really impractical plan, right? So if you kind of boil all that together and we said, right, that's our maximum possible rate of fat loss, here's what it would look like down here if somebody actually tried to put that into practice, right? So we started like week 1 at 90 kilograms. We had 27 kilos of body fat mass. It's obviously week zero, not week 1, so we haven't lost any fat this week. If we lose fat at the maximum possible rate, this person could have lost 1.2 kilos by the next week, right? So they could have gone down to 88.8 kilos, which would give them 25.8 kilograms of body fat mass, which would, of course, have a knock-on effect later, right? So we're going to have less calories available from fat to meet the same deficit. So we could see how that 90 kilogram person could, in theory, have lost like 3 pounds that week at the upper end. But they would have had to do something pretty extreme to do that, right? So it's not going to work in practical terms. Like they're going to be like exercising like absolute troopers, which most people can't really do because you have to build that up slowly. Or they're going to be like starving themselves to some like degree that's not sustainable, right? And by not sustainable, I mean you cannot sustain the nutrients and fiber and vitamins and minerals and essential fats and whatnot that are necessary for continued life, right? So it's just not going to fly. So generally speaking, unless somebody's like a well-trained sports person who's got this kind of stuff really dialed in, or like a bodybuilder or something like that, trying to lose body fat at the absolute fastest rate possible is like, that's a bad plan, right? It's not going to work. So what I normally set for my clients is about 50% of the maximum rate that their body could in theory support, right? So they'll be losing body fat at about half the maximum physiological rate, right? And so if we did that for our same 90 kilogram person, you could see that week on week, that would represent about 0.6 or about a half kilogram of body fat loss for them, right? Which, by the way, turns out to be between 1 to 2 pounds per week, right? So it's about 1.4 pounds per week in this case for a little while, right? So that's pretty doable. So if we did half of that, you can see that there'd be a lot more like non-protein calories available, right? So they could fit in, I don't know, a piece of bread from time to time, perhaps, or something of that sort. Now, so fair enough, right? So we can see we've landed in a situation where it's like due to the combination of like how much exercise you can support and how many calories you need to support the good functioning of your body and long-term health, and also how many calories are available from your fat. In between all of those, we get to like a combination of factors that gets us to about potentially 1 to 2 pounds a week of reasonable fat loss, right? But what happens if this goes up or down, right? So say we have somebody who's like 140 kilograms and they're like 45% body fat, right? Well, we can see, I won't go through all the maths again afterwards, but right over here, there would be nothing what the hellsoever wrong with that person losing 3 pounds of body fat per week, right? That's totally fine. That's like they've got a lot more energy available in their body, right? So you can see there's 63 kilograms of body fat available to that person. So that could, in theory, provide them with 4,400 calories worth of energy per day, which is not going to due to all the other factors that we talked about earlier, right? To actually do that practically, they'd have to bring their activity factor up to about 2.2, which is like, that's a lot of stuff. That's like, hours of training per week, which they're probably not going to be adapted to if they've got up to 140 kilograms with 45% body fat, right? It's been a while since that person has really like gone for it from an exercise and nutrition perspective. But like, nothing whatsoever the hell wrong with that person losing like 3 pounds of fat per week, 3 pounds of fat per week, down to like 2 pounds of fat per week. So, while the 1 to 2 pound is a good rule of thumb, it's certainly not something that's set in stone for all people for all time, right? Now, let's have a look at the other end of the spectrum as well. Suppose somebody's like, say a shorter female, so they're 60 kilograms, but they're not really happy with their body fat levels. They've got like 35% body fat, so that's kind of getting into, what we would classically consider the higher risk categories for like long-term health issues and whatnot. That's possible. You meet people like that who are like not very tall. So, for this person, you can see losing 2 pounds of fat per week, or even 1 pound of fat per week, is maybe not so practical, right? So like they're over here. Actually, it's not so bad. Like 1 pound is going to be on the real upper end for them, right? So again, for them to get to this point with a reasonable calorie deficit, not like the most extreme possible thing at the end of the spectrum, like 1 pound per week is pretty good, right? So, for that person, if they lost a pound per week, they're cruising. You know what I mean? That's like a decent chunk of the maximum amount of fat available to that person's body. But they might be looking at stuff online and seeing like, so-and-so lost 10 pounds in a month. Oh my God, I've only lost 4 pounds. What the hell? I'm really failing here. And I was like, no, no, these aren't just absolute numbers. You got to compare like what was the size of that, what was that person's body size and how much fat do they have available. So like those guys in The Biggest Losers that lose 50 pounds in a month, you know, maybe there's not as much wrong with that as you might think, right? It's not like, if this 60 kilogram person lost 50 pounds, you'd be like, whoa, that's you're dying, no good. But like if a 400-pound person loses 50 pounds, it's like, it's a lot, but it's not absolutely insane, right? So, you got to recognize that these things are all kind of percentage based. So there you go. This is, and like, are these numbers absolutely correct? Of course not, right? But like, are they good to within 10 to 20%? Yep. Not so bad. So, recognizing that, you can use this kind of idea to decide, all right, so by the time Christmas rolls around this year, what could I reasonably get to? So say I know whatever I am, I'm 88 kilos, not me personally, but, say somebody knows this, and their body fat calculator estimates them at like about 25% body fat. So we know they're probably between 20 and 30%, and it's somewhere in that range. So we can see like an absolutely insane body fat target for them, an absolutely insane body weight target for them would be like about 82 kilos by the end of the year. And that would be like absolutely, eating and training like it's their job, which isn't necessarily accessible to most people. So the most they could do would be probably get down to about 20% body fat per these kind of numbers. So that would be like the absolute max. And then like a pretty reasonable target for them would be like 84.7 kilos, right? So losing about 5 kilos over the course of 7 weeks wouldn't be insane for this person. That could be done reasonably physiologically sustainably, without too much trouble. So, boom, about 1 pound per week kind of territory on there. So there you go. That's a very, very long way of saying that if you're trying to set a fat loss goal, it should probably be between 1 to 2 pounds a week. There's going to be some modifiers on that for if your body weight is very high or if your body weight is very low, or if you're very well adapted to doing much physical activity or not very well adapted to doing a bunch of physical activity. If any folks want to copy this sheet, I'd be happy to send one over to you, send me a message. And heck, if you've got questions, post them below, or send me a mail. See you later.